Hallo und herzlich willkommen zu einer Sonderfolge Vollverbuggt. Wir reagieren mal wieder, überreagieren ein bisschen mit dem Alex heute.
Moin.
Und mir, dem Falko. Und mit mir im Video, Face Reveal quasi.
Ziemlich aufregend,
Total. Nächstes Mal bist du dran. Nee, also und zwar... Ja?
Ich bin ja sowieso total aufgeregt, weil ich mich total auf dieses Road to PS5 Reveal freue, was jetzt gleich stattfinden wird.
Genau, denn darauf reagieren wir heute. Die Xbox Series X wurde ja gerade angekündigt quasi. Die Specs der Xbox Series X wurden ja vor kurzem bekannt gegeben. Und jetzt ist auch die PS5 soweit. Was glaubst du? Was sind deine Erwartungen daran?
Also ich bin erstmal gespannt, es wird wahrscheinlich eine eher technische Vorstellung, aber ich hoffe trotzdem, dass sie ein kleines bisschen was an Bildmaterial zeigen, also Games und so weiter.
Ja.
Wo ich überhaupt keine Ahnung habe, ist, wie lange wird diese ganze Vorstellung jetzt dauern? Ist es eine Viertelstundensache? Ist es eine halbe Stunde? Oder ist es noch länger? Keine Ahnung, ich bin wirklich sehr gespannt. Es soll jetzt auf jeden Fall in weniger als 60 Sekunden losgehen. Ja. Wir müssen mal gucken, ob das YouTube-Video dann tatsächlich auch direkt startet um die Uhrzeit. Also ich bin hier direkt in dem PlayStation-Channel. Mal gucken.
Ja, ich auch. Ja, ich bin gespannt. Ich bin gespannt über Specs. Ich bin auch gespannt, ob sie die Hülle, also den Formfaktor quasi zeigen. Ne? Weil wir wissen immer noch nicht, wie die aussieht. Wir haben nur diese seltsamen Bilder von diesen komischen Dev-Kits. Aber keine Ahnung.
Wobei ich zugeben muss, wie die Konsole selber aussieht, ist für mich gar nicht unbedingt so relevant, wenn sie nicht komplett scheiße aussieht, sodass man sich dafür schämen muss. Wichtig ist für mich, was schmeißt sie an Bildern raus? Was schmeißt sie an Games raus? Wie sieht die nächste Generation von Spielen aus?
Ja. Ich glaube, das wird ja nicht unähnlich zur Series X sein. Wobei, wer weiß.
Ja, nur bei der Series X ist es bei mir mittlerweile so, dass das Interesse gar nicht mehr so groß ist, weil ich die Xbox-Spiele eigentlich erwarte ich, dass alle Xbox-Spiele, die für die Series X kommen, auch für den PC kommen. Ja. Und deswegen ist Xbox für mich nicht mehr so relevant wie PlayStation, die ja doch einen ganzen Haufen von Exclusives haben. Wobei, selbst das wird ja in letzter Zeit so ein kleines bisschen aufgeweicht. Also ein Death Stranding erscheint für PC und auch ein Horizon Zero Dawn erscheint für PC, worüber ich mich sehr freue.
Es geht los.
Oh, es geht noch nicht los. Es geht in einer Minute 50 los.
1 Minute 50. Ich mache den Sound hier mal ein bisschen leiser, damit ich dich noch gut verstehen kann.
Genau.
Coole Mucke.
Und ist auch richtig geiles Setup, was ich hier jetzt ausnutze. Ich habe jetzt das Video von dem PlayStation Channel, da habe ich auf meinem großen Fernseher. Ja. Und trotzdem kann ich dich in Cast noch auf meinem Monitor sehen. Das ist ziemlich cool.
Ja. Ja, ich habe mir einen neuen Monitor geholt und benutze jetzt aber trotzdem nur 2. Ich hatte ja vorher schon 2, aber ich habe jetzt einen der beiden quasi abgegradet. Ich weiß nicht, was ich mit einem dritten Monitor sollte. Für Stream so ein bisschen vielleicht irgendwann, aber
Bist du denn zufrieden?
Mit dem Monitor? Ja, der wackelt ein bisschen. Ich muss mal gucken, ob ich alle Schrauben richtig angezogen habe. Also für einen fast 400 € Monitor. Aber ansonsten ist cool. Ich habe so ein bisschen ausprobiert, ob ich beides, also 1440p und 144 Frames machen kann. Kann ich auch, aber dann wird es sehr schnell sehr warm in meinem Raum. Aber ich habe vorhin ein bisschen Doom gespielt auf 1080p mit 144 Frames und das läuft butterweich, konstant 144 Frames. Macht schon Spaß, sieht schon sehr flüssig aus. Ich hatte noch nie einen 144 Hertz Monitor. Von daher bin ich da schon ziemlich begeistert.
Ist das schon Doom Eternal oder ist das noch das?
Nee, noch nicht. Doom Eternal kommt am Freitag raus.
Ach so.
Ich freue mich schon drauf.
Ah, okay.
Ja, ich stimme mich da quasi ein. Ich streame ein bisschen Doom 2 zuletzt.
Okay.
Und aber jetzt muss ich eine neue Grafikkarte natürlich dann auch ausprobieren. 10 Sekunden.
Jetzt geht's hier gleich los. Ja. Ich bin gespannt. Vielleicht starten sie ja direkt mit einem Game.
Ja. Neue Ankündigung wäre geil. Direkt so Launch.
Hi. Unfortunately, we had to cancel the talk that we had planned for GDC. But we do have some super exciting news about PS5. And who better to bring that to you than the one and only Mark Cerny. Without further ado, over to you.
Ich wollte gerade sagen, Mark Cerny ist aber alt geworden. Da ist er.
There will be lots of chances later on this year to look at the PlayStation 5 games. Today, I want to talk a bit about our goals for the PlayStation 5 hardware and how they influenced the development of the console. I think you all know I'm a big believer in console generations. Once every 5 or 6 or 7 years, a console arrives with substantially new capabilities. There's a lot of learning by the game developers, hopefully not too overwhelming, and soon there's games that could never have been created before. Now, it used to be that as a console designer, you'd somehow intuit what would be the best set of capabilities for the new console, and then build it in complete secrecy. For the PlayStation consoles, that period lasted through PlayStation 3, a powerful and groundbreaking console, but also one that caused quite a lot of heartache, as it was initially difficult to develop games for. So, starting with PlayStation 4, we've taken a different approach, roughly centered around 3 principles. The first of these is listening to the developers, which is to say that a lot of what we put into a console derives directly from the needs and aspirations of the game creators. We definitely do have some ideas of our own, but at the core of our philosophy for designing consoles is that game players are here for the fantastic games.
Ja, die haben sich gerade so ein bisschen bewegt. Ich dachte auch so, vielleicht wegen Corona abgesagt, aber ganz am Anfang haben sie sich einmal kurz bewegt.
Or help them realize their dreams, we will do.
Da der links wiggelt.
About once every 2 years, I take a tour of the industry. I go to the various developers and publishers, sit down, and discuss how they're doing with the current consoles and what they'd like to see in future consoles. This requires weeks on the road, as reaching the bulk of the game creators involves talking to well over 100 people at something like 24 publishers and developers. And it is incredibly valuable. By the way, the feature most requested by the developers, that was an SSD, which we were very happy to put in the hardware, but a lot of problem solving was required. I'll be doing a deep dive on the SSD and surrounding systems later on in this talk. It's also key to make a generational leap while keeping the console sufficiently familiar to game developers. I think about this in terms of balancing evolution and revolution. Now, with PlayStation 1, 2, and 3, the target was a revolution each time with a brand new feature set. That was great in many ways, but time for the developers to get up and running got longer.
Nee, gar nicht.
Vielleicht eher wie die Oldschool
I called this time to triangle. Here's what I had for those 3 consoles. To be clear, I'm not talking about time to make a game. Developers will be ambitious, and it may take them 6 years or so to realize their vision. What I'm talking about is that dead time before graphics and other aspects of game development are up and running, and trying to minimize that. On the other hand, if we're trying to reduce that dead time to 0, that means the
PlayStation 4 bei der Grafik denn ausgenommen?
We're handcuffed. We need to judge for each feature
weil sie seitdem, glaube ich, die ganz normale x86-Architektur benutzen und dann
So with PlayStation 4, we were able to strike a pretty good balance between performance and familiarity. We got required learning back to PlayStation 1 levels. With PS5, the GPU was definitely the area we felt the most tension between adding new features and keeping a familiar programming model. Ultimately, I think we've ended up with something under a month of getting up to speed. That feels like we're striking about the right balance. I'll go into a bit more detail later today about our philosophy with the GPU and the specific feature set that resulted.
Ja, ist auch nicht überraschend. Hat ja auch wenig Sinn gemacht bei der PS3, der ewig gedauert, bis da die Spiele gut wurden.
By which I mean something other than CPU performance, GPU performance, and the amount of RAM. The increase in graphics performance over the past 2 decades has been astonishing, but there are other areas in which we can innovate and provide significant value to the game creators, and through them, the players. That's why the SSD was very much on our list of directions to explore, regardless of what came out of the conversations with game developers and publishers. The biggest feature in this category is the custom engine for audio. That's today's final topic. The push for vastly improved audio, and in particular 3D audio, isn't something that came out of the developer meetings. It's much more the case that we had a dream of what might be possible 5 years from now, and then worked out a number of steps we could take to set us on that path.
3D audio.
So here again are the 3 principles, the first being enabling the desires of developers to drive the hardware design. To me, the SSD really is the key to the next generation. It's a game changer. And it was the #1 ask.
Ja, ich glaube, das wird schon ganz cool.
Ja, aber ich habe in meinem PC seit 4 Jahren eine SSD.
Ja,
That was a discussion we were also
Crazy
having
ist es jetzt
internally.
auch nicht.
It was clear that the presence of a hard drive in every PlayStation 4 was having a positive impact. A lot of things that would simply have been impossible at Blu-ray
SSDs sind
discs
mittlerweile ja
now possible.
fast so
At the same
fast
time,
gleich
though,
gepreist mit
2015
HDD,
and
was
2016,
Storage
when we were
angeht.
having these
Zumindest
conversations,
nicht mehr diesen
developers were
mega
already
Gap
banging
dazwischen.
up against the limits of the hard drive. And a lot of developer time was being spent designing around slow load speeds.
Ich habe auch eine SSD an meiner PS4
I
dran.
want to focus in on just one number,
Aber
which is how long it
das
takes
wird ja noch
to
nicht
load
genutzt,
a
sodass
gigabyte
die
of data from a hard drive.
Ladezeiten noch nicht
The difficulty
wesentlich besser
being
sind.
Ja,
that hard
stimmt, ein paar
drives are
Sekunden,
neither
wenn's gut läuft.
particularly fast nor flexible. If all your data is in one block, which is frankly not very likely, you can load 50 to 100 megabytes a second, depending on where the data is located on the hard drive. Let's assume it's on the outer edge, which means loading a gigabyte takes 10 seconds. If you compress your game packages, you can fit more data on the Blu-ray disc and also effectively boost your hard drive read speed by the compression ratio. We support zlib decompression on PlayStation 4 that gets you something like 50% more data on the disk and 50% higher effective read speed. Unfortunately, though, it's highly likely that your data is scattered around in various files on the hard drive, as well as sourced from multiple locations within those files. So lots of seeks are needed at 2 to 50-ish milliseconds each. My rule of thumb is that the hard drive is spending 2/3 of its time seeking and only 1/3 of its time actually loading data. Putting all of that together, a gigabyte is very roughly 20 seconds to load from a hard drive. Now, a gigabyte is not much data. Games are using 5 or 6 gigabytes of RAM on PlayStation 4, so boot times and load times can get pretty grim. Or to put that differently, as a player, you wait for the game to boot, wait for the game to load, wait for the level to reload every time you die, and you wait for what is euphemistically called fast travel. And all of that leads to the dream. What if we could have not just an SSD, but a blindingly fast SSD? If we could load 5 gigabytes a second from it, what would change? Now, SSDs are completely different from hard drives. They don't have seeks as such. If you have a 5 gigabyte a second SSD, you can read data from 1,000 different locations in that second, pretty much at speed. As for time to load a gigabyte, this is next gen we're talking about, so memory is bigger. Instead, we should be asking how long to load 2 gigabytes.
Versucht er schon ganz schön hart, die SSD zu verkaufen.
Ja,
that's
also
amazing.
es
We're
ist
talking two
wirklich
orders
kein
of
Gamechanger. Ich
magnitude.
glaube, das fühlt
Very
sich gut an.
roughly
Gerade beim Fast Travel würde es sich
100
gut anfühlen, aber es ist absolut
Which
kein
means
Gamechanger.
Macht da ja zero Unterschied, sobald das Spiel geladen ist. Ne?
Genau.
Vielleicht ein bisschen beim Streamen in so großen Welten. Aber das handeln die meisten Spiele ja schon sehr gut.
Same for a reload. You're
also,
immediately back in the action.
Red Dead Redemption beispielsweise ist eine Qual.
So fast,
Ja.
Also im Spiel ist es okay, aber
das meine ich ja.
erstmal
Also,
zu laden, ist es eine Qual.
Klar, aber danach ist es halt seamless. Das meine ich, dass die Entwickler relativ gut dabei sind mittlerweile. Weil es gibt ja dann keine Ladezeit mehr, wenn du nicht fast
Pretty cool, right?
Ja.
But for me, this is not the primary reason to change from a hard drive to an SSD. The primary reason for an ultra-fast SSD is that it gives the game designer freedom. Or to put that differently, with a hard drive, the 20 seconds that it takes to load a gigabyte can sabotage the game that the developer is trying to create. I think almost all of us in the room have experienced this, maybe in different ways. Say we're making an adventure game and we have 2 rich environments where we each want enough textures and models to fill memory, which you can do as long as you have a long staircase or elevator ride or a windy corridor where you can ditch the old assets and then take 30 seconds or so to load the new assets. Having a 30-second elevator ride is a little extreme. More realistically, we'd probably chop the world into a number of smaller pieces and then do some calculations with sight lines and run speeds like we did for Haven City when we were making Jak 2. The game is 20 years old, but not much has changed since then. All those twisty passages are there for a reason. There's a whole subset of level design dedicated to this sort of work, but still, it's a giant distraction for a team that just wants to make their game. So when I talked about the dream of an SSD, part of the reason for that 5 gigabyte a second target was to eliminate loads, but also part of the reason for that target was streaming. As in, what if the SSD is so fast that as the player is turning around, It's possible to load textures for everything behind the player in that split second. If you figure that it takes half a second to turn, that's 4 gigabytes of compressed data you can load. That sounds about right for next gen. Anyway, back to the hard drive. Another strategy for increasing effective read speed is to make big sequential chunks of data. For
Ja,
example,
muss man sehen, wie sie
we
das
might
nutzen,
group
ne?
all the data
Ja.
Also die
together for
Entwickler.
each city block.
Ja, ist natürlich
That
interessant, ob das
removes
dann
most of the
PC-Spiele auch
and the streaming
verbessern
is
wird,
fast.
ne?
But
Weil
there's a
Spiele ja
downside
meistens
too,
Console
which is that
First
frequently
entwickelt
used
werden.
data is included in many chunks and therefore is on the hard drive.
Und was
many,
dann passiert, wenn du
many
deine
times.
Spiele auf der
Marvel
HDD installierst auf
Spider-Man
dem
uses
PC?
this strategy, and
Ja.
though it works very well for increasing the streaming speed, there's a massive duplication as a result. Some of the objects like mailboxes or news racks are on the hard drive 400 times. What I'm describing here are things that cramp a creative director's style. Either level design gets a little bit boring in places, or the data is duplicated so many times that it no longer fits on the Blu-ray disc. And you end up with hard limits on the player's run speed or driving speed. The player can't go faster than the load speed from the hard drive. And finally, I'm sure many of you have noticed that after a patch download, the PlayStation 4 will sometimes take a long time to install the patch. That's because when just part of a file has been changed,
Oh,
the
yeah.
new data can be downloaded pretty quickly. But before the game boots up, a brand new file has to be constructed that includes the changed portion. Otherwise, every change would add a seek or two. Even so, you can occasionally see this happening on game titles. They start to hitch once they get patched enough. With an SSD, though, no seeks, so no need to make brand new files with the changes incorporated into them, which means no installs as you know them today. There's yet one more benefit, which is that system memory can be used much more efficiently. On PlayStation 4, game data on the hard drive feels very distant and difficult to use. By the time you realize you need a piece of data, it's much too late to go out and load it. So system memory has to contain all of the data that could be used in the next 30 seconds or so of gameplay. That means a lot of the 8 gigabytes of system memory is idle. It's just waiting there to be potentially used. On PlayStation 5, though, the
Ich glaube,
SSD is very
wenn
close
sie
to being like more
gar
Typically,
kein
it's fast
Gameplay
enough where
zeigen,
you realize you
dann
need a
werden
piece of data.
relativ viele
You can just
Zuschauer
load
heute
it from the
enttäuscht
SSD and
sein.
use it.
Ja.
There's no need to have
Ja,
lots of
wobei
data
ich weiß nicht, ob
parked
ich das
in
jetzt
system memory waiting to
erwartet hätte.
potentially
Aber 16 GB
A
GDDR6,
different way of
also
saying
genau
that is that
gleich
most
wie die
of the
Series
RAM
X.
is working on the game's
Das ist ja
behalf.
schon mal eine Information.
This is one of the
Doppelt so
reasons
viel
that
wie
16 gigabytes of
die
GDDR6
PS4 Pro.
feels right
Ja.
for PlayStation 5. The presence of the SSD reduces the need for a massive intergenerational increase in size. So back to the dream of the SSD. Here's the set of targets. Boot the game in a second. No load screens. Design freedom, meaning no twisty passages or long corridors. More game on the disk and more game on the SSD. And finally, those
Ja, ich bin echt
patched
gespannt, ob das eine Auswirkung auf PC-Spiele hat und
The
wie dann
reality,
PCs
though,
ohne
is that
SSD damit
SSD
umgehen werden.
Ja,
is just
Ob
one
es
das ist tatsächlich eine
eine,
gute Frage.
vielleicht eine
lot of
Systemanforderung wird bei
bottlenecks
Spielen, dass sie auf
between the
SSD installiert sein müssen auf
and
dem
the game
PC.
code that uses the data. You can see this on PlayStation 4. If I use an SSD with 10
Oder es
times
ist
the
eben
speed of a
tatsächlich,
standard hard drive, I probably see
PS5
only double
Exclusives.
the loading speed,
Ja.
if that. For PlayStation 5, our goal was not just that
Aber
the
viel ist
SSD
immer noch
itself would be
Multiplattform.
100 times faster. It was that
Das wäre
game
natürlich
loads
schade,
and streaming
wenn es dann einfach keinen Vorteil macht,
So
weil die Leute dann doch
every
lieber mit
single
HDD
potential
im
bottleneck
Hinterkopf
needs to be
entwickeln.
addressed. And there are a
Zumindest für
lot
die
of
nächsten
them.
1-2 Jahre.
Let's look at check-in and what happens when its overhead gets 100 times larger. Conceptually, check-in is a pretty simple process. Data is loaded into system memory from the hard drive or SSD. It's examined. A few values are tweaked to check it in, and then it's moved to its final location. At the SSD speeds we're talking about, that last part, moving the data, meaning copying it from one location to another, takes roughly an entire next-gen CPU core. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. If all the overheads get 100 times larger, that will cripple the frame rate as soon as the player moves, and that massive stream of data starts coming off the SSD. So to solve all of that, we built a lot of custom hardware, namely a custom flash controller and a number of custom units in our main chip. The flash controller in the SSD was designed for smooth and bottleneck-free operation, but also with games in mind. For example, there are 6 levels of priority when reading from the SSD. Priority is very important. You can imagine the player heading into some new location in the world and the game requesting a few gigabytes of textures. And while those textures are being loaded, an enemy is shot and has to speak a few dying words. Having multiple priority levels lets the audio for those dying words get loaded immediately. On one side, that flash controller connects to the actual flash drive that supplied the storage. To reach our bandwidth target of 5 gigabytes a second, we ended up with a 12-channel interface. 8 channels wouldn't be enough. The resulting bandwidth we've achieved is actually 5.5 gigabytes a second. With a 12-channel interface, the most natural size that emerges for an SSD is 825.
Was SSDs so normalerweise
The key
machen.
question for us was, is that enough? I mean, it's tempting to add more, but Flash certainly doesn't come cheap, and we have a responsibility to our gaming audience to be cost-effective with regards to what we put in the console. Ultimately, we resolved this question by looking at the play patterns of a broad range of gamers. We examined the specific games that they were playing over the course of a weekend or a week or a month, and whether that set of games would fit properly on the SSD. We were able to establish that the friction caused by reinstalls or redownloads would be quite low, and so we locked in on that 825 gigabyte size, while also preparing multiple strategies so that those who want more storage can add it. I'll go through the details in a moment.
Unter einem
Back to
Terabyte.
the Flash controller.
Und sie sagen, die Spiele können größer werden, größer werden, größer werden.
Jo, das ist ziemlich schwach. Und weniger als die Series X. Die hatte nämlich das Terabyte.
Auch als SSD?
Ja. Einen NVMe SSD, also einen Standard-Dings. Deswegen habe ich gerade überlegt, ob dann gegebenenfalls weniger als 12 Channels rausgehen. Aber ich will jetzt nicht nachgoogeln.
Similar types of algorithms, but about 10% better
800 Gigabyte ist echt nicht viel.
Ja, das stimmt. Aber ich meine, 1 Terabyte ist dann auch nicht viel mehr als 825, ne?
Ja,
das sind, ja.
175 Gigabyte. Mal ein Spiel.
Ja, genau.
So we hustled and built a custom decompressor into the I/O unit, one capable of handling over 5 gigabytes of Kraken format input data a second. After decompression, that typically becomes 8 or 9 gigabytes, but the unit itself is capable of outputting as much as 22 gigabytes a second if the data happen to compress particularly well. By the way, in terms of performance, that custom decompressor equates to 9 of our Zen 2 cores. That's what it would take to decompress the Kraken stream with a conventional CPU. There's a lot more in the custom I/O unit, including a dedicated DMA controller. The game can direct exactly where it wants to send the data coming off of the SSD. This equates to another Zen 2 core or two in terms of its copy performance. Its primary purpose is to remove check-in as a bottleneck. There's 2 dedicated I/O coprocessors.
Will uns jetzt den schwächeren CPU schon mal schmackhaft machen. So, keine Sorge, wir haben nicht so viele Cores, aber wir haben voll viele extra Chips, deswegen brauchen wir nicht so viele Cores.
This lets us bypass traditional file I/O and its bottlenecks when reading from the SSD. The other is responsible for memory mapping, which I know doesn't sound like anything related to the SSD, but a lot of developers map and remap memory as part of file I/O, and this too can become a bottleneck. There are coherency engines to assist the coprocessors. Coherency comes up a lot in places. Probably the biggest coherency issue is stale data in the GPU caches.
Ich kann halt nicht beurteilen, wie viel davon jetzt wirklich besonders bei der PlayStation 5 ist und was das im Spielbetrieb tatsächlich bedeutet.
Ja. Where the coherency engines inform the GPU of the overwritten address ranges, and custom scrubbers in several dozen GPU caches do pinpoint evictions of just those address ranges.
Also bei der Geschwindigkeit wird die ganze Geschichte doch eine Stunde dauern. Wir sind noch nicht mal über die SSDs hinaus, so ein bisschen.
Aber das ist wahrscheinlich auch ihr Main Selling Point.
And the whole process of loading it happens invisibly to you and at very high speed. Back to the dream. Thanks to all of that surrounding hardware, our 5.5 gigabytes a second really should translate into something like 100 times faster I/O than PS4 and allow the dream of no load screens and super fast streaming to become a reality. Having said that, expandability of our SSD is going to be quite important. Flash is costly, and you may very well want to add storage to whatever we put in the console.
Yes.
Now, the kind of storage you
Sicherheit.
need depends on how you're going to use it. If you have an extensive PlayStation 4 library and you'd like to take advantage of backwards compatibility to play those games on PlayStation 5, then a large external hard drive is ideal. You can leave your games on the hard drive and play them directly from there, thus saving the pricier SSD storage for your PlayStation 5 titles, or you can copy your active PlayStation 4 titles to the SSD. If your purpose in adding more storage is to play PlayStation 5 titles, though, ideally you would add to your SSD storage. We will be supporting certain M2 SSDs. These are internal drives that you can get on the open market and install in a bay in the PlayStation 5. As for which ones we support and when, I'll get to that in a moment.
Oh, okay. M2 sind diese kleinen Sticks, die so ein bisschen aussehen wie RAM-Sticks, die am PCs direkt ins Motherboard geschraubt werden oft.
Decompression, I/O coprocessors and all the other features I was talking about.
Das heißt nicht irgendwie schnell mal extern mit USB.
That commercial drive has to be at least as fast as ours. Games that rely on the speed of our SSD need to work flawlessly with any M2 drive. When I gave the Wired interview last year, I said that the PlayStation 5 SSD was faster than anything available on PC. At the time, commercial M2 drives used PCIe 3.0, and 4 lanes of that cap out at 3.5 gigabytes a second. In other words, no PCIe 3.0 drive can hit the required spec. M2 drives with PCIe 4.0 are now out in the market. We're getting samples and seeing 4 or 5 gigabytes a second from them. By year's end, I expect there will be drives that saturate 4.0 and support 7 gigabytes a second. Having said that, we are comparing apples and oranges, though, because that commercial M2 drive will have its own architecture, its own flash controller, and so on. For example, the NVMe specification lays out a priority scheme for requests that the M2 drives can use. And that scheme is pretty nice, but it only has 2 true priority levels. Our drive supports 6. We can hook up
Klingt so ein bisschen, als müsstest du den offiziellen PlayStation 5 SSD.
Vor allen Dingen finde ich, ist es auch kein besonders gutes Verkaufsgespräch, wenn du direkt bei der Ankündigung oder bei der Vorstellung der Systemarchitektur der Konsole sagst, ihr braucht wahrscheinlich mehr Speicherplatz. So geht es.
Ja, aber den gibt's leider noch nicht. Der ist vielleicht am Ende des Jahres gibt's den vielleicht, hoffen wir.
And some M2 drives have giant heat sinks. In fact, some of them even have their own fans. Right now, we're getting M2 drive samples and benchmarking them in various ways. When games hit beta as they get ready for the PlayStation 5 launch at year end, we'll also be doing some compatibility testing to make sure that the architecture of particular M2 drives isn't too foreign for the games to handle. Once we've done that compatibility testing, we should be able to start letting you know which drives will physically fit and which drive samples have benchmarked appropriately high in our testing. It would be great if that happened by launch, but it's
ganz schönes Upgrade dann auch, ne? Das heißt, du musst die Konsole aufschrauben und das Teil da rein packen.
Okay, back to our principles. Balancing evolution and revolution is the second of them. This was definitely a recurring theme with the GPU. We need new GPU features and capabilities. If we only have more performance, it's not really a new generation of console. Of course, many of these capabilities result in more performance. That's part of why a PlayStation 5 teraflop is more powerful than a PlayStation 4 teraflop. But we aren't just looking for the performance. We also need the ability to do something with the GPU that could not have been done before.
Ray tracing.
And we need higher performance per watt. Every time we double the performance of some GPU component, we don't want to find out we've doubled the power consumed and the heat produced. But at the same time, we have to make sure the GPU can run PS4 games, and we have to ensure that the architecture is easy for the developers to adopt.
Okay.
Now, backwards compatibility was handled masterfully by AMD. They treated it as a key need throughout the design process. As our solution to adding new features without blindsiding developers, we made sure that if there were new significant features, it would be optional to use them. The GPU supports ray tracing, but you don't have to use ray tracing to make your game. The GPU supports primitive shaders, but you can release your first game on PlayStation 5 without making any use of them. Before I get into the capabilities of the GPU, I'd like to make clear 2 points that can be quite confusing. First, we have a custom AMD GPU based on their RDNA 2 technology. What does that
gleiche
mean?
wie Series
AMD
X.
is continuously improving and revising their tech. For RDNA 2, their goals were, roughly speaking, to reduce power consumption by re-architecting the GPU to put data close to where it's needed, to optimize the GPU for performance, and to add a new, more advanced feature set. But that feature set is malleable, which is to say that we have our own needs for PlayStation, and that can factor into what the AMD roadmap becomes. So collaboration is born. If we bring concepts to AMD that are felt to be widely useful, then they can be adopted into RDNA 2 and used broadly, including in PC GPUs. If the ideas are sufficiently specific to what we're trying to accomplish, like the GPU cache scrubbers I was talking about, then they end up being just for us. If you see a similar discrete GPU available as a PC card at roughly the same time as we release our console, that means our collaboration with AMD succeeded in producing technology useful in both worlds. It doesn't mean that we as Sony simply incorporated the PC part into our console.
Ja, klingt auch ein bisschen nach so,
This continuous improvement in AMD
das gleiche
technology
wie
makes
auf
it
dem
dangerous to rely on
PC.
teraflops as an absolute indicator
Keine
of
Angst,
performance.
ist trotzdem
And
speziell.
CPU count should be avoided as well. In the case of CPUs, we all understand this. The PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 each have 8 CPUs, but we never think that meant the capabilities and performance are equal. It's the same for CUs. For one thing, they've been getting much larger over time. Adding new features means adding lots of transistors. In fact, the transistor count for a PlayStation 5 CU is 62% larger than the transistor count for a PlayStation 4 CU. Second, the PlayStation 5 GPU is backwards compatible with PlayStation 4. What does that mean? One way you can achieve backwards compatibility is to put the previous console's chipset in the new console, like we did with some PlayStation 3s, but that's of course extremely expensive. A better way is to incorporate any differences in the previous console's logic into the new console's custom chips, meaning that even as the technology evolves, the logic and feature set that
ist natürlich auch viel einfacher, wenn du es auf ganz normaler Architektur aufbaust und nicht auf irgendwelchen komischen Sonderchips.
One advantage of this strategy is that once backwards compatibility is in the console, it's in. It's not as if a cost down will remove backwards compatibility like it did on PlayStation 3. Achieving this unification of functionality
ist Microsoft natürlich noch einfacher mit einem DirectX-based
roadmap advancement creates a potential divergence in logic. Running PS4 and PS4 titles at boosted frequencies has also added complexity. The boost is truly massive this time around, and some game code just can't handle it. Testing has to be done on a title-by-title basis. Results are excellent, though. We recently took a look at the top 100 PlayStation 4 titles as ranked by playtime, and we're expecting almost all of them to be playable at launch on PlayStation 5.
Interessant.
With regards to new features, as I said, our strategy was to try to break new ground, but at the same time not to require use of the new
PlayStation 4.
Welche nicht.
Ja, genau.
For more than a decade, GPUs have imposed a restriction on game engines. Software handles vertex processing, but for the most part, dedicated hardware is responsible for the triangles and other geometry that the vertices form. That means it's not possible to do even basic optimizations, such as aborting processing of a vertex if all geometry that uses it is off-screen. PlayStation 5 has a new unit called the Geometry Engine, which brings handling of triangles and other primitives under full programmatic control. As a game developer, you're free to ignore its existence and use the PlayStation 5 GPU as if it were no more capable than the PS4 GPU, or you can use this new intelligence in various ways. Simple usage could be performance optimization, such as removing backfaced or off-screen vertices and triangles. More complex usage involves something called primitive shaders, which allow the game to synthesize geometry on the fly as it's being rendered. It's a brand new capability. Using primitive shaders on PlayStation 5 will allow for a broad variety of techniques, including smoothly varying level of detail, addition of procedural detail to close-up objects, and improvements to particle effects and other visual special effects. Another major new feature of our custom RDNA-based GPU is ray tracing, using the same strategy as AMD's upcoming PC GPUs. The CUs contain a new specialized unit called the intersection engine, which
Okay,
can calculate the
ich
intersection
ändere meine Meinung. Wenn Sie jetzt noch Gameplay zeigen,
to use the intersection engine.
diejenigen Leute, die
First
das
you build
interessieren
what is
würde, haben
called
Sie jetzt
an acceleration
längst verloren.
It's
Also,
data
Ja,
on
ist echt
RAM,
mehr für
which
die,
means all
Absolut.
of
für
it.
die Techies, ne?
There's
Jetzt
a
erklärt er uns
specific
noch
set of formats
Raytracing.
you can use.
Ja.
They're variations
Ich habe noch nichts
on the same
Raytracing-mäßiges
concept.
ausprobiert. Ich habe jetzt
Then, in your shader program,
die erste
you use a
offiziell
new
Ja.
instruction that asks the
Raytracing-capable
intersection engine to check
Grafikkarte,
array against
die ich hier
the
hatte.
DVH.
Aber es gibt ja
While
irgendwie
the
nur 4
intersection
Spiele.
engine is
Muss man bei
processing
Minecraft
requested
reinschauen.
ray-triangle box intersections,
Das ist, glaub ich,
the
das Einzige,
shaders
was ich
are
habe.
free to do other work. Having said
Quake
that,
2
the
gab's, glaub ich,
Raytracing
auch irgendwie mit
instruction is pretty
Raytracing.
memory intensive.
Control
So it's a good
und
mix
Shadow of the
of
Tomb
logic
Raider
and
müssten Raytracing können.
Ja, habe ich
There's of
beide
course
nicht.
no
Auch kein
rule to
Battlefield
use
5.
Raytracing.
Das war
PS4
kein anderer.
graphics engines will run just fine on PlayStation 5, but it presents an opportunity for those interested. I'm thinking it'll take less than 1 million rays a second to have a big impact on audio.
Das war
That
ziemlich
should be enough for
interessant.
audio occlusion and some
Auch
reverb
Metro ist, glaube ich, das
With a bit more
hungrigste.
of the GPU invested in
Es kommt ein bisschen darauf an, welche dieser
Raytracing,
Funktionen, Full Raytracing und Global Illumination, die verwenden. Ein paar verwenden
Having
nur
said
das
that,
eine Funktion und
adding
ein paar
ray-traced
verwenden andere.
shadows and
Ja.
reflections to a traditional graphics
Und das ist ein
engine
Riesenunterschied,
can
wie
easily
hungrig
take hundreds of
dann
millions of rays
die
a
Funktion
second.
ist.
And full
Ich habe ja auch nur
Raytracing
die günstigste von
How
den
far can we
Karten.
go? I'm
Macht
starting
mir da
to
nicht
get
zu
quite
viele
bullish.
Hoffnung.
I've already seen a PlayStation 5 title that's successfully using ray tracing-based reflections in complex animated scenes with only modest costs. Another set of issues for the GPU involved size and frequency. How big do we make the GPU, and what frequency do we run it at? This is a balancing act. The chip has a cost, and there's a cost for whatever we use to supply that chip with power and to cool it. In general, I like running the GPU at higher frequency. Let me show you why.
Jetzt bin ich mal
Here's
gespannt, wie es
two
sich
possible
vergleicht
configurations for a
zur
GPU roughly of the level of
zur
the
Series
PlayStation 4
X.
Pro. This is a thought experiment. Don't take these configurations too seriously. If you just calculate teraflops, you get the same number. But actually, the performance is noticeably different because teraflops is defined as the computational capability of the vector ALU. That's just one part of the GPU. There are a lot of other units. And those other units all run faster when the GPU frequency is higher. At 33% higher frequency, rasterization goes 33% faster. Processing the command buffer goes that much faster. The L2 and other caches have that much higher bandwidth, and so on. About the only downside is that system memory is 33% further away in terms of cycles. But the large number of benefits more than counterbalance that. As a friend of mine says, a rising tide lifts all boats. Also, it's easier to fully use 36 CUs in parallel than it is to fully use 48
Friend
CUs.
of mine says.
When
Das ist
triangles
nicht
are
ein
small,
totales
it's much harder to
0815
fill all those CUs with useful
saying.
work. So there's a lot to be said for faster, assuming you can handle the resulting power and heat issues, which frankly, we haven't always done the best job at. Part of the reason for that is, historically, our process
Ja,
for
die
setting
PS4
CPU
Pro
and
war
GPU
sehr laut.
frequencies has relied on some heavy-duty guesswork with regards to how much electrical power games will consume and how much heat will be produced as a result inside of the console.
Power Consumption ist mir ziemlich
Power
egal, aber
consumption
ja,
varies
das
a lot
ja,
from game to game.
übersetze ich halt
When I played God of
direkt
War
in
on my PS4 Pro,
Ventilatorgeschwindigkeit.
I know the power
Absolut.
consumption is high just by the fan noise. But power isn't simply about engine quality. It's about the minutia of what's being displayed
Genau, was er
and
sagt.
how. It's counterintuitive, but processing dense geometry typically consumes less power than processing simple geometry, which is, I suspect, why Horizon's map screen, with its low triangle count, makes my PS4 Pro heat up so much. Our process on previous consoles has been to try to guess what the maximum
Nur der
power
Mapscreen
consumption
ist
during
das
the
Verrückte,
entire
ne?
console
Ja.
lifetime might be, which is to say, the worst case scene in the worst case scene, and prepare a cooling solution that we think will be quiet at that power level. If we get it right, fan noise is minimal. If we get it wrong, the console will be quite loud for the higher power games, and there's even a chance that it might overheat and shut down if we misestimate power too badly.
Wasserkühlung.
PlayStation 5 is especially challenging because the CPU supports 256-bit native instructions that consume a lot of power. These are great here and there, but presumably only minimally used. Or are they? If we plan for
Könnte glatt
major
sein, ne? So
256-bit
All-in-One
instruction usage,
Wasserkühlung
we
sind
need to
ja
set the
relativ
CPU
günstig
clock
mittlerweile.
substantially lower, or
Wobei der
noticeably
Vorteil gegenüber einem
increase the
großen
size
Kühlblock
of
auch nicht
power
so
supply
riesig ist.
and fan. So,
Eine
after
Konsole hast
much
wenig Platz.
discussion, we decided to go with a very different direction on PlayStation 5. We built a GPU with 36 CUs. Mind you, RDNA2 CUs are large. Each has 62% more transistors than the CUs we were using on PlayStation 4.
36.
So, if we compare transistor counts, 36 RDNA2 CUs equates to roughly 58 PlayStation 4 CUs. It is a fairly sizable
Ich bin jetzt nicht sicher, aber ich glaube,
Then
die
we went with a
Xbox
variable
Series
frequency
X
strategy
lag
for
bei
PlayStation 5,
50.
which is to say we continuously run the GPU and CPU in boost mode. We supply a generous amount of electrical power and then increase the frequency of GPU and CPU until they reach the capabilities of the system's cooling solution. It's a completely different paradigm. Rather than running at constant frequency and letting power vary based on the workload, we run at essentially constant power
52.
and let the frequency vary based on the workload. We then tackled the engineering challenge of a cost-effective and high-performance cooling solution designed for that specific power level. In some ways, it becomes a simpler problem because there are no more unknowns. There's no need to guess what power consumption the worst-case game might have. As for the details of the cooling solution, we're saving them for our teardown. I think you'll be quite happy with what the engineering team came up with. So, how fast can we run the
Vielleicht also
GPU
noch
and
Wasserkühlung.
CPU with this strategy?
Noch ist es nicht
The
ausgeschlossen.
simplest approach would be to look at the actual temperature of the silicon die and throttle the frequency on that basis. But that won't work. It fails to create a consistent PlayStation 5 experience. It wouldn't do to run a console slower simply because it was in a hot room. So rather than look at the actual temperature of the silicon die, we look at the activities that the GPU and CPU are performing and set the frequencies on that basis, which makes everything deterministic and repeatable. While we're at it, we also use AMD's Smart Shift technology and send any unused power from the CPU to the GPU so it can squeeze out a few more pixels. The benefits of this strategy are quite large. Running a GPU at 2 gigahertz was looking like an unreachable target with the old fixed frequency strategy. With this new paradigm, we're able to run way over that. In fact, we have to cap the GPU frequency at 2.23 gigahertz so that we can guarantee that the on-chip logic operates properly. 36 CUs at 2.23 gigahertz is 10.3 teraflops, and we expect the GPU to spend most of its time at
12
or
teraflops
close
bei der
to
Series
that
X.
frequency and performance. Similarly, running the CPU at
Naja,
3
aber er meint
gigahertz
ja,
was
diese
causing headaches with the
höhere
old strategy.
Frequency sorgt eben
But
dafür, dass
now
alles
we
auf
can
einer
run it as
höheren
high
Frequency
as
läuft.
3.5 gigahertz.
Ja.
In fact, it spends most of its time at that frequency. That doesn't mean all games will be running at 2.23 gigahertz and 3.5 gigahertz. When that worst-case game
Okay,
arrives,
das ist auch
it will
niedriger
run
als bei
at a
der
lower clock speed.
Series X,
But
die ist
not
bei
too much
3,8
lower. To reduce
Gigahertz und
power by
3,6
10%,
im
it only takes a couple
Multithreading-Modus.
of percent reduction in frequency, so I'd expect any downclocking to be pretty minor.
Sieht so aus, als würde sie
All things
leicht schwächer
considered,
reinkommen.
change to a variable frequency approach will show
Bei
significant
diesen ganzen
gains for
Custom-Chips, wer
PlayStation.
weiß, ne? Aber
The final of our
Grafik
three
ist bei
principles
beiden
was about
mit Custom
finding new
RDNA2,
dreams. It's important
RDNA2
for us on the
wird
hardware
sich nicht
team
so
to
stark
find
unterscheiden.
new ways to expand or deepen gaming, and that's
Ja,
what led us to focus on 3D audio.
Es geht am Ende wieder um die Exclusives und die Exclusives kann ich bei Xbox auch auf dem PC spielen.
Preis wird aber auch einen
absolut.
Einfluss haben, ne? Also wenn du eine
PS5
PS5 100 Euro billiger kriegen kannst, für 400 statt 500 oder 300 statt 400, macht das einen großen Unterschied. Größer als 2 Teraflops.
For example, on PlayStation 4, there's fierce competition for the Jaguar CPU cores. Audio typically ends up getting just a fraction of a core. That's not much of a computational resource, particularly when you consider that the visuals run at 30 or 60 frames a second, but audio processing needs to happen at almost 200 times a second. So it's been tough going making forward progress on audio with PlayStation 4, particularly when PlayStation 3 was such a beast when it came to audio.
Über die PS4 geredet.
The SPUs in Cell were almost a perfect device for audio rendering. Simple pipelined algorithms could really take advantage of asynchronous DMA.
Kommt der Teil, der mich am wenigsten interessiert.
100% utilization of the floating point unit. There's unfortunately nothing comparable on PlayStation 4. Probably the most dramatic progress in the PlayStation 4 generation has been with virtual reality. The PSVR hardware has its own audio unit. It supports about 50 pretty decent 3D sound sources. And this provided a hint as to where we could go with audio, as well as some valuable experience. Not to oversimplify, but here were our goals for audio on PlayStation 5. The first goal was great audio for everyone, not just VR users or soundbar owners or headphone users. That meant audio had to be part of the console. It couldn't be a peripheral. The second goal was to support hundreds of sound sources. We didn't want developers to have to pick and choose what sounds would get 3D effects and which wouldn't. We wanted every sound in the game to have dimensionality. And finally, we wanted to really take on the challenges of presence and locality. Now, when we say presence, we mean the feeling that you're actually there. You've entered the matrix. It's not, of course, something we thought we could perfectly achieve, but the idea was that if we stopped using just a rain sound and instead used lots of 3D audio sources for raindrops hitting the ground at all sorts of locations around you, then at some point your brain would take a leap and you'd begin to have this feeling of real presence inside the virtual world of the game. This has the capacity to affect your appreciation of the game, just like music in a game does. The concept of locality is simpler. It's just your sense of where the audio is coming from, to the right of you, behind you, above you. This can immerse you further in the game, and it can also directly enhance the gameplay. To use Dead Space as an example, I know, old school, you're fighting enemies in fairly dark, spooky locations. Back in the day, if you played the game using the TV speakers, you could tell that there was one last enemy growling and hunting you down, but it was difficult to tell quite where that enemy was. With headphones, you could tell that the enemy was somewhere on the right, which let you deduce, if you couldn't see it, that it must be somewhere behind and to your right. But with 3D audio with good locality, the idea is you know the enemy is precisely there, and you turn and you take it out. So, how do we know where a sound is coming from in the first place? Well, all those bumps and folds in the ear have a meaning, evolutionarily speaking. Based on what direction the sound is coming from, sound waves bounce around inside the ear, there's some constructive and destructive interference, and the result is a change in volume.
Aber die hatten doch seit der PS3 schon 5.1 Support mal mindestens, oder? Wenn nicht 7.1.
These volume changes and phase shifts are different for each direction and also vary depending on the frequency.
Fernseher spiele ich auch nur mit den Fernsehboxen und dann halt Kopfhörer für den PC.
The way that the sound changes based on direction and frequency can be encoded in a table called the head-related transfer function, or HRTF. Here's part of one. The vertical axis is the frequency. The horizontal axis is the direction, front, back, left, right, and the color gives the degree of attenuation of the sound at that frequency. The HRTF is as unique to an individual as a fingerprint is. In fact, you're looking at mine right now. Here's how we measure an HRTF. We've taken hundreds of people through this process. We put a microphone in the subject's left and right ear canals, and then sit the subject down in the middle of an array of 22 speakers. We then play an audio sweep from each speaker as we rotate the subject. In the course of 10 or 20 minutes, we're able to sample the HRTF at over 1,000 locations.
Ich möchte ja ungern 10, 20 Minuten in dem Ding sitzen.
But it's computationally expensive. The simplest way to use an HRTF is to process a sound source to make it appear as if it's coming from one of those 1,000 locations we sample. Unfortunately, the processing has to be done in frequency domain rather than time domain, so there's multiple fast Fourier transforms needed for every sound source for every audio tick. That's a lot of multiplies. This computational complexity was the determining factor for our strategy. It meant we had to bite the bullet and design and build a custom hardware unit for 3D audio. Collectively, we're referring to the hardware unit and the proprietary algorithms we run on it as Tempest 3D Audio Tech. The meaning of 3D audio and technology should be pretty obvious here. As for Tempest, I feel it really reflects our goals with audio. It suggests a certain intensity of experience and also hints at your presence within it. We're calling the hardware unit that we built the Tempest engine. It's based on AMD's GPU technology. We modified a compute unit in such a way as to make it very close to the SPUs in PlayStation 3. Remember when I said that they were ideal for audio? So the Tempest engine has no caches, just like an SPU. All data
ist immer
access
schwierig,
is via
ne?
DMA,
Weil wie
just like
verkaufst du das
SPU.
den Leuten?
Our
Sound?
target was that it would have
Das siehst du
more
nicht in Videos,
power
lässt sich
than
wahrscheinlich
a
nicht wirklich
CPU, thanks to the
nachbilden.
parallelism that a
Die meisten
GPU
Leute haben
gives
scheiß
you, and that it would
Soundsysteme.
be more efficient
Dafür
than
ein
our
extra
GPU,
Chip.
thanks to the
Bin mal gespannt, was das
SPU-like
auch
architecture.
kostenmäßig
The
für
goal
Auswirkungen
being
hat.
to make
definitiv.
possible near 100%
Ich finde die Idee
utilization
total geil.
of the
Also
CU's vector
Sound
units.
besser zu machen, finde ich voll
Where we
gut,
ended
aber ich
up
brauche
is
eben
a
ein
unit
neues
with roughly the
Peripheriegerät
same
dann dafür.
SIMD
Ne?
power and bandwidth as all 8 Jaguar cores in the PlayStation 4 combined. If we were to use the same algorithms as PSVR, that's enough for something like 5,000 sound sources. But of course, we want to use more complex algorithms, and we don't need anything like that number of sounds. It would have been wonderful if a simpler strategy, such as using Dolby Atmos peripherals, could have achieved our goals, but we wanted 3D audio for all, not just those with licensed soundbars or the like. Also, we wanted many hundreds of sound sources, not just the 32 that Atmos supports. And finally, we wanted to be able to throw an overwhelming amount of processing power at the problem. And it wasn't clear what any peripheral might have inside of it. In fact, with the Tempest engine, we've even got enough power that we can allocate some to the games, to the extent that games want to make use of convolution reverb and other algorithms that are either computationally expensive or need high bandwidth. But the primary purpose of the Tempest engine remains 3D audio. Now, 3D audio is a major academic research topic. It's safe to say that no one in the world has all of the answers. And the set of algorithms that has to be invented, tuned, or implemented to realize our vision for 3D audio is immense. For example, use of HRTFs in games is quite complex. Before, I talked about making a sound source appear as if it's coming from one of those 1,000 HRTF sample locations. But for high-quality 3D game audio, we have to handle other possibilities. The sound source might not be at one of the 1,000 HRTF sample locations, so we have to blend the HRTF data from the closest locations that we have sampled. The sound source might be moving, which needs very special handling as that blend keeps changing, and that can cause phase artifacts in the resulting audio. Or the sound source might have a size to it, meaning it should feel as if it's coming from an area rather than a single point. There's also whole categories of approaches to be handled. 3D audio can be implemented using individual processing of 3D sound sources. But alternatively, ambisonics can be used for 3D audio. Ambisonics being somewhat like the spherical harmonics used in computer graphics. And finally, there's audio devices. The player might be using headphones or TV speakers or have a higher-end surround sound setup with 6 or more speakers, all of which need different approaches. That's a lot of variations. It's nice to have the computational resources of the Tempest engine, but it's clear that achieving our ultimate goals with 3D audio is going to be a multi-year, step-by-step process.
Da wirklich von
Having
übrig
said
bleibt.
that, headphone audio implementation is largely complete at this time. It was a natural place for us to start. With headphones, we control exactly what each ear hears, and therefore the algorithmic development and implementation are more straightforward.
Das wäre ja schon mal was, ne? Wenn
For
das zumindest
TV
mit jedem
speakers and stereo
Standardkopfhörer
speakers, we're in the
einigermaßen
process of
funktioniert.
implementing virtual surround sound. The idea being that if you're sitting in a sweet spot in front of the TV, then the sound can be made to feel as if it's coming from any direction, even behind you. Virtual surround sound has a lot in common with 3D audio on headphones, but it's more complex because the left ear can hear the right speaker and vice versa. We have a basic implementation of virtual surround sound up and running. We're now looking at increasing the size of that sweet spot, which is to say, making the area you need to be in to feel the 3D effect larger, and we're also working to boost the sense of locality. Headphone audio is the current gold standard for 3D audio on PlayStation 5, but we're going to see what we can do to bring virtual surround sound to a similar level, after which we'll start in on setups with more speakers, such as 6-channel surround sound. It's now to the point where some of the PlayStation 5 games in development are extensively using these systems.
Naja, also die Leute, die das High-End-Soundsystem haben nichts von der tollen neuen Engine. Habe ich das jetzt richtig verstanden? Zumindest nicht für die nächsten 2 Jahre.
Ja, genau.
Headphones and wow, I could feel a difference. 3D audio has that dimensional feel to it. Conventional stereo audio feels smashed flat by comparison. The improvement is obvious. So, a big advancement.
Ich denke mal, dass man da zumindest mal ein Demo-Video von machen kann, oder? Wenn es nicht in Echtzeit berechnet werden muss.
Like I was talking about earlier when I explained our target of presence. Well, the answer is no, but you've probably caught on to what's missing here, namely whose HRTF was being used. It wasn't mine, it was the default HRTF. The audio team analyzed the hundreds that they measured and chose the one they felt was the closest fit to the total game-playing audience. This shows a piece of the default HRTF on the left and my HRTF on the right. You can see that the general features are much the same, but the details are quite different. With the default HRTF, as I said, the 3D audio sounds pretty great. When I use my HRTF, though, the audio reaches a higher level of realism, which is to say that when using headphones and my HRTF, I occasionally get fooled and even think a sound is coming from the real world when it's actually coming from the game.
Klar, wir lassen uns alle unsere HRTFs einlesen in so einem von diesen Dingern.
Sufficiently far from the default HRTF, that's the red dot here, that they can toggle between PS4 style and PS5 style audio and not
ob man das tatsächlich machen kann.
I've had a few people
ich setze mich 10-20 Minuten in die Kabine, die er gezeigt hat.
A bit better stereo audio. Presumably, they're the ones at the very edges of this diagram. Which means what HRTF you're using is key. I'd like everyone to be able to experience what I'm experiencing, but obviously it's not possible to measure the HRTF of every PlayStation user. That means HRTF selection and synthesis are going to be big topics going forward as the Tempest technology matures. At PlayStation 5 launch, we'll be offering a choice of 5 HRTFs. There's
Wie Standard sind deine Ohren? Darauf wird's ankommen.
That's just the first step, though. This is an open-ended research topic. Maybe you'll be sending us a photo of your ear, and we'll choose a neural network to pick the closest HRTF in our library. Maybe you'll be sending us a video of your ears and your head, and we'll make a 3D model of them and synthesize the HRTF. Maybe you'll play an audio game to tune your HRTF. We'll be subtly changing it as you play and home in on the HRTF that gives you the highest score, meaning that it matches you the best. This is a journey we'll all be taking together over the next few years. Ultimately, we're committing to enabling everyone to experience that next level of realism. Hopefully, I've been able to illustrate a bit about our design and decision-making
als neuen Horizont zu sehen,
and why PlayStation 5 has the feature set.
Ja, gerade wenn man grafisch nicht mehr so viel machen
kann.
Ich hätte es ja lieber in CPU-Power gesehen, dass Spiele halt mehr machen, ohne mehr zu zeigen, was KI und solche Geschichten
I guess we'll find out soon enough. Thank you for your time today.
Das war's, eine Stunde. Ja, Takeaway?
Takeaway, ja, wird eine SSD haben, was nice ist und die Ladezeiten verkürzen wird. Seamless Fast Traveling finde ich eine feine Sache, aber ist jetzt kein mega Gamechanger. Zu den tatsächlichen Grafik-Specs kannst du wahrscheinlich mehr sagen als ich. Aber was ich über Audio meinte, ja, also das gilt halt weiterhin, ne? Wenn du grafisch nicht mehr so viel machen kannst. Audio ist für mich tatsächlich noch ein relativ unbestellter Acker. Da kannst du, glaube ich, noch eine Menge rausholen. Ich bin gespannt. Also Audio, vor allen Dingen, wenn es mit normaler Hardware funktioniert, das finde ich schon grundsätzlich eine coole Sache.
Ja, mich juckt's jetzt auch in den Fingern. Gleich nach der Aufnahme werde ich dann direkt mal rumgucken, ob ich da was finde, wo man sich so ein Demo anhören kann. Ansonsten Specs architekturmäßig total ähnlich zur Series X, Zen 2 im CPU, Custom RDNA 2 als GPU, aber alles ein bisschen schwächer.
Ja, und wenn sie dann tatsächlich auch ein bisschen, also wenn das darin resultiert, dass sie ein bisschen langsamer ist, sie aber mit diesem zusätzlichen Audio, mit dieser Audio Processing Unit trotzdem auf den gleichen oder höheren Preis kommen, dann wird es, glaube ich, ein ziemlich schwieriger Kampf.
Ja. Ja.
Aber am Ende holst du die Leute wahrscheinlich dann immer noch mit der besseren Erfahrung, mit den besseren Spielen. Also, ich meine, wir wissen, dass die Switch eine viel, viel geringere Processing Power hat als die PS4 und die Xbox One. Trotzdem verkauft sie sich wie geschnitten Brot. Also, ja, und da liegt es dann eben halt an der Portabilität. Aber du hast ja auch eine Menge Exclusives auf Switch, die einfach geil sind.
Ja.
Und das haben sie meiner Meinung nach eben bei der heutigen Gelegenheit echt versäumt. Und wirklich,
rein technische Präsentation, ne?
Ja.
Ich gucke gerade nochmal, ob ich mehr rausfinden kann über die SSD in der Xbox, die ja auch eine M2 ist, also so eine NVMe, also so eine auf dem Motherboard quasi angeschraubte SSD. Das wird übrigens auch interessant, wie expandable das dann ist auf der Xbox Series X. Preispunkt wird, glaube ich, interessant sein.
Absolut.
Also, wie gesagt, eine 0,1 bis 0,3 Gigahertz CPU und 2 Teraflops, weniger als 2 Teraflops Grafik, nimmst du halt in Kauf, wenn du dafür 100 Euro weniger bezahlst, weil der Unterschied ist jetzt nicht so groß. Ja. So ein bisschen wie bei der PS Pro und der normalen, ne? Ja. Die haben einen noch größeren Unterschied, glaube ich, oder ähnlich großen Unterschied und es macht jetzt nicht so ein Riesendings. Und es sind immer noch fast dreimal so viele, also mehr als doppelt so viele Teraflops wie die PS4 Pro.
Für mich
da sollte so schon was drin sein.
Sind noch ein paar andere Sachen interessant. Das eine ist, was passiert mit 2K-Bildschirmen. Also sie werden ja wahrscheinlich nativ 4K anbieten. Wie sieht das Ganze dann auf einem 2K-Bildschirm aus?
Ja.
Oder auch auf einem 1080p Fernseher oder Bildschirm?
Ja, Riesenproblem ja damals bei der 360, als rausgekommen war und ein paar Spiele unlesbare Texte hatten. Ich habe mir Dead Rising direkt am Anfang gekauft.
Ja.
Und du konntest die Texte nicht lesen, weil es halt nur auf HD-Fernseher ausgelegt war. Und ich hatte damals noch keinen HD-Fernseher.
Ja.
Und es war nicht spielbar manchmal.
Ja, das ist natürlich ein Riesenproblem. Also vor allen Dingen, weil die Verbreitung von 4K-Fernsehern, das wird immer mehr. Aber es haben eben trotzdem noch nicht alle einen 4K-Fernseher. Und dann ist es halt auch immer so eine Sache, ich habe richtig Bock drauf. Also je nachdem, wenn die Spiele geil werden, würde ich auch gerne früh eine holen. Aber du bist als Early Adopter, bist du eigentlich immer angeschmiert. Also wir haben da schon diverse Male drüber geredet. Du bezahlst mehr und du hast das weniger ausgereifte Produkt.
Mhm.
Das ist einfach Fakt. Und ja, will man das in Kauf nehmen? Will ich das als Kunde in Kauf nehmen? Ich bin mir noch nicht sicher.
Ja. Ich habe nochmal nachgeguckt. Die SSD der Xbox, der kommenden, ist auch eine PCIe 4.0 SSD. Also auch der neue Standard. Hier in dem Artikel, den ich jetzt gefunden habe auf Windows Central, wird das mit 4,8 GB pro Sekunde compressed angegeben. Also weniger als die 5,5, die Sony gerade genannt hat. Wobei in einem ähnlichen Bereich. Bin mal gespannt, ob das einen Unterschied macht.
Weißt du,
weil das Ding ist ja auch, du machst ja kein Spiel, was nur auf einer PS5, also klar, ein paar machen Spiele, die nur auf einer PS5 laufen, aber das sind dann 3-4 Exclusives.
Ja.
Das heißt, die meisten Spiele werden so gemacht werden, dass sie auf der Series X gleich laufen. Das ist ja auch im Interesse von allen.
Ja, das stimmt. Weißt du, was ich gerade bei mir selbst so ein bisschen feststelle? Ich möchte eigentlich, dass die PlayStation 5 besser ist.
Ja.
Aus irgendeinem Grunde möchte ich, dass die PlayStation 5 besser ist und dass die Xbox Series X jetzt nicht die Nase vorn hat. Aber eigentlich, wenn man ganz ehrlich ist, von diesem Gedanken müsste man sich eigentlich frei machen.
Ja, stimmt. Aber es ist schwierig, das auszublenden. Ne? Das ist bei mir generationsmäßig auch mal hin und her gefloppt.
Ja.
Die PS3 habe ich am Anfang sehr nicht mocht, um es mal sanft auszudrücken.
Ja.
Und dann ist es für die PS4 wieder umgeschwungen. Vielleicht schwingt es jetzt zurück, das Pendel der besseren Konsole. Wer weiß.
Das kann schon sein.
Habe ich nichts gegen.
Das kann schon sein. Vor allen Dingen, was ich vorhin gesagt habe über die Spiele, die ich dann auch auf meinem PC spielen könnte. Ja, meine Grafikkarte ist jetzt vor kurzem abgegradet, aber eben immer noch nicht das neueste Modell. Über meinen Prozessor möchte ich schon gar nicht mehr sprechen.
Ja.
Also, wenn es bedeutet, die Xbox Series X Spiele auf dem PC in miserabler Qualität zu spielen, dann ist wahrscheinlich das Gesamtpaket Xbox Series X vielleicht doch wieder interessanter.
Ja. Ja, bin sehr gespannt. Also im Moment, rein zahlenmäßig, unter den beiden gefällt mir die Series X zumindest mal besser.
Mhm.
Es ist ein Upgrade von meinem PC aus, vor allem was den CPU angeht. Der ist nämlich bei mir auch noch ziemlich alt. Bin mal gespannt, was das für eine Auswirkung hat. Und wenn dann wirklich SSD vernünftig auf beiden genutzt werden. Auch was die Upgradability angeht, ne? Wenn jetzt am Ende Microsoft sagt, du kannst da jede SSD reinbauen.
Ja.
Und nicht nur diese M2s. Und nicht nur besondere M2s, sondern quasi jede M2. Dann ist es natürlich auch viel leichter, das abzugraden. Das könnte auch nochmal ein Faktor sein.
Das stimmt, aber das bedeutet natürlich dann auch wiederum, dass sie die potenziellen Vorteile, die das Ganze hat, nicht ganz so effizient nutzen können. Ne?
Klar, aber
also
das, glaube ich, hat dann bei den wenigsten
Tailor-made
Spielen wirklich einen Einfluss.
Ja, guter Punkt.
Also nur bei den paar Exclusives dann halt.
Je weiter sich die Architekturen voneinander entfernen, desto komplizierter wird es natürlich auch für die Entwickler.
Ja.
Dann musst du eben doch wieder ein komplett anderes Spiel für die PlayStation 5 und die Xbox Series X machen. Und wenn das der Fall ist, bedeutet das, dass die Entwickler selbst die Kapazitäten nicht ganz so gut ausnutzen können, die einzelnen Konsolen haben.
Vielleicht einer der Gründe, warum Sony gerade versucht, so viele Sachen in-house zu holen. Ne? Es gibt jetzt Gerüchte, dass sie versuchen, Metal Gear und Silent Hill von Konami zu kaufen, zum Beispiel.
Ja.
Was vielleicht einigermaßen günstig ist, weil Konami da nicht so super viel Interesse dran hat, aber den Exclusive Pool der PlayStation auf jeden Fall erweitern würde.
Bin mal gespannt. Cleverer Move.
Ja.
Ja,
kommt auch ein bisschen drauf an, wie viel Geld die auch zur Verfügung haben für solche Projekte, ne?
Ja.
Lautstärke ist noch was mich interessiert. Er hat ja nicht über die Kühlung gesprochen.
Ja.
Die Series X GPU läuft bei einer trotz höherer Teraflop-Zahl bei einer niedrigen Taktfrequenz, 1,825. Das heißt, sie sollte eigentlich kälter laufen und dann auch leiser dadurch. Es sei denn, Sony kommt jetzt tatsächlich mit einer Wasserkühlung um die Ecke oder so.
Ja. Also bleibt weiterhin spannend. Ich bin sehr gespannt. Vor allen Dingen möchte ich gerne wissen, wann sie eine echte Vorstellung von Spielen machen.
Ja. Jetzt gerade, weil die E3 auch wegfällt, ne?
Ja,
genau. Abgesagt. Ich denke mal, da wird es ein Online-Event geben, auf das wir dann auch wieder live reagieren können, wo das alles angekündigt wird.
Meinst du, zwischen jetzt und dem E3-Zeitpunkt passiert nichts mehr?
Ich glaube, keine der großen Ankündigungen. Ich glaube, Preis, Release-Date und so weiter werden wir da erfahren. Jetzt auch mal gucken, ob die Virussituation dann einen Einfluss drauf hat.
Ja. Das stimmt.
Müssen wir auch noch mal gucken. Cool.
Okay.
Dann, war es das für jetzt. Allen danke beim Zuschauen, Zuhören. Und wir melden uns dann bald mit einer ganz regulären Folge Vollverbuggt wieder. Bis dahin.
Macht's gut. Ciao.
Ciao, ciao.